Unlike unlike racist Joe Biden, I've spent my entire life working hand in hand with Black Americans to create jobs, build buildings, invest in our communities, and expand opportunity and freedom for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. And we have. I built a lot of buildings, and I want to tell you, a Black worker is a great worker. You've done an incredible job. They've done an incredible job.
It was 1963 in New York City, and Maxine Brown, a nurse, was looking for a place to live. She applied for an apartment owned by Donald Trump's father, Fred.
I was turned away because of my color.
While at the time Donald was only 17, he was already involved in the company. Stanley Leibowitz was the rental agent who took Maxine's application.
Fred Trump came into my office with his son Donald at his side. I asked him what I should do with the application of Miss Brown. He told me at that time to take the application and put it in the desk drawer, as he does not rent to people of color, utilizing the N-word. And Donald shook his head, agreeing with his father.
By 1967, state investigators reportedly found out that out of some 3,700 apartments in Trump Village, only 7 were occupied by African-American families. By 1973, Donald Trump was the president of Trump Management. Annette Gandy Fort, a teacher, applied to a different Trump building.
I was Black. I was not wanted. I don't think that it looked good in their estimation to have Black people living in their facility.
She says there is no doubt in her mind that Donald Trump continued the practices of his father. The Department of Justice alleged a Trump employee was instructed to write C in order to indicate that the prospective tenant was colored.
The super said that there were no apartments, and that was not true.
Donald started his career back in 1973 being sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination.
Annette was part of that lawsuit.
We, along with many, many other companies throughout the country, as a federal lawsuit, were sued. We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do.
Court records show it actually wasn't so easy to do. 3 years after the settlement, the Department of Justice went back to court saying Trump was not complying with the settlement agreement. 4 years later, the Trump Organization was again taken to court in a class action lawsuit alleging a...
Yeah, it can go on and on. The key thing, though, we settled the suit with no admission of doing anything wrong or guilty. That's how all suits are settled. And like he said, it was very easy. Pay the fine or whatever the damages and say, as long as it says we don't have to admit. That's what civil suits are. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into his, you got a problem. And look, Uncle Luke Campbell said it best, and we'll talk about what he said about Trump's latest extremely racist, tone-deaf speech in front of Black folks, mostly Black men, dudes. I mean, I'm not the brightest bulb in the whole structure here with Black men, but my gosh, I do know when somebody is talking to me in a very racist way, and you guys out there applauding. I mean, he kept the Blacks. Who says that except a stone cold racist? The Blacks. Everything he said the Blacks. The Blacks worked for me. The Blacks did a good job. The Blacks. y'all gotta be smoking something. Anyway, we're gonna talk about that this morning. Clarence Thomas. Oh gosh, Clarence Thomas, one of these guys who are painted black, walks around in blackface. He hired a clerk accused of writing "I hate Black people." Yeah, that clerk. We're gonna talk about that this morning as well. Alabama mayor is telling Black athletes to stay away if the state legislature passes this crazy anti-DEI bill. And also, Flint Councilman Eric Mays died over the weekend. Really an outspoken figure, controversial figure. But I tell you what, he stood, as they say today, he stood on business. And then also this morning, a conversation with the one and only Joy Ann Reid from MSNBC. She's got a great new book out. Um, you're gonna really enjoy it. So we'll talk to Joy Ann Reid this morning. Boy, oh boy. And Power 96 brings news this morning, as he often does. He says it's first Happy Monday, and the cast of A Different World, he says, is on a 10-city HBCU tour in celebration of the sitcom's 35th year legacy. Good stuff there, Power 96, of course. Um, who also says the so-called black conservatives have no shame. They are suckered for a mugshot and sneakers. Yep, we'll get into that right now. Maybe now though, Power 96 folks like Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube and Sexy Red and Killer Mike and others will wake up. Even Luther Campbell, he pretty much summed things up by posting on X or Twitter that, quote, after that Trump speech, if you're black and you're voting for him, you have to be out of your mind. Of course, Uncle Luke's diatribe was laced with a lot of profanity, as you know he would. He says, if that doesn't motivate you, nothing will. It was a brazen display of political manipulation when the twice impeached, 4 times indicted, twice sexual assaulter, at least according to a civil jury. Uh, Former President Trump took the stage at the Black Conservative Federation Gala in South Carolina using racially charged rhetoric and shamelessly attempting to forge a connection between his multiple criminal indictments and the historical struggles of Black Americans. The twice impeached guy, 4 times indicted. We always got to say that because it's like people don't seem to get it. I don't care where you are. Okay, we're talking about the President of the United States. But let's talk about your neighborhood association, the president of your neighborhood association. Would you want someone with 91 felony counts, someone who said, I can grab women by the private parts, and then goes out and proceeds to get twice found to be responsible for sexual assault, commits, according to a New York judge, massive business fraud, faces almost $500 million in penalties for that. But you want this individual to be your neighborhood association president? I don't think so. So how is it? How is it? That's why I always say it. I report on politics. I don't get involved in it. It's screwed up. How is it that this guy's even in the running? How's he in the running? How is he getting millions of people? The Koch brothers just pulled their support, any money from Nikki Haley, and now they're going to divert it to the Trump team. How do you? Well, that's different, right? Koch brothers, we understand, but how is it that anybody can wrap? I don't care if you're the most ardent of supporters. If that was your family member, Don Jr. and whoever Trump's, Melania, et cetera, et cetera. How do you support public? You go. I tell you, black folks, go sit down. Go somewhere and sit down. Running for president. but he's got and I mean, look, let's face it. You got 2 people legitimately running for president. Yeah, sure. RK, Nikki Haley's still around, but it's Biden versus Trump. How do you even if you're a supporter, it's like you got some Democrats and some Democratic supporters talking about Biden's age, and maybe we need like a Gavin Newsom or Vice President Kamala Harris or somebody to lead the ticket. And then, but how do you and they talk about because of Biden's age, but how do you support a stark raving criminal somebody who has been charged 91 times. 91 times. It's one thing to be charged, maybe 5 times, 6, 7 times, and be able to say, "Look, this is," as he said, "this is a witch hunt." 91! 4 different jurisdictions: New York, Georgia, DC, and Florida. That means everywhere you go, everywhere you lay your hat, the temptation said everywhere he laid his hat was his home. Everywhere he laid his hat, he was committing a crime, allegedly. How is it that it's even a conversation? But this guy, he goes on, boasted to black men in general. Boy, where would we be without black women? Don't even want to even think about it. But where would we be without 'em? But in front of these black, I remember going
That's
to
why the black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. And they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. It's been pretty amazing. But and then
the black people. This, and thus the sneakers and everything too. I went to a when he was president, went to a speech of his. I had to down in South Carolina in Charleston, and not Charleston, Columbia, and sitting in the front row, and there was all of these black pastors. It was about rallying them, and they're standing there yelling, they're chanting like they're at a sporting event. And I'm thinking, what in the world is really going on here? I mean, what in the name of Kunta Kinte is happening? I was like, oh my gosh, is this really? You have sometimes some things you see for yourself. Tiffany had so much, you got to see that. I don't need to see that. But some things until you see, especially when it comes to certain folks, you gotta actually, because you want to get the feel like what's the body language, these guys were cheering like it was like the football game. It was like fourth and goal. Trump boasted about his legal battles. He suggested, I mean, not he more than suggested that the black community supports him, which is not accurate, of course, but he suggested to black men that they support him because they identify with the discrimination he claims to face, or in the face of all that white privilege, as Greer would say. He claims to face discrimination. It's his privilege, is why you don't see him behind bars right now. Let, let Obama have one indictment, one charge. It would have been mugshot city behind bars. They would have had Biden would have had to do a pardon already. He says, I got indicted a second time, a third time, and a fourth time. And a lot of people said that's why the blacks like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. He declared callously, of course, drawing applause from that uninformed, forgot, I don't know myself audience, attempting to equate his privileged legal battles with the systemic oppression endured by Black Americans throughout history. He asserted further, I think that's why the blacks are so much on my side now, because they see what's happening to me happens to them. And then he asked the question, to which they roared in approval. Does that make sense? It makes absolutely no sense. Throughout the evening, he continued his disturbing narrative, pointing to his mugshot from the Fulton County election interference case as a symbol embraced by, as he says, the blacks. He says, my mugshot, we've all seen the mugshot, and you know who embraced it more than anybody else? The blacks. He says, it's incredible. It is incredible. Oh my gosh. He's obviously was saying that African Americans are particularly familiar with mugshots. Tasteless attempt of at humor there. Tasteless. Sickening, as Bobby Henry, our chair and West Side Gazette publisher, has just wrote in. Trump made racially insensitive comments about the brightness of the lights on it. Did y'all see that part? That was everything was appalling. Everything is appalling as to what he said in that speech, and he got cheered. He says, "These lights are so bright in my eyes that I can't see too many people out there, but I can see the blacks. I can see the black ones." He says, "I can't see any white ones. You see, that's how far I've come," he said. "That's how far I've come." Of course, it played into the racial stereotypes, leaving some on the stage uncomfortably laughing, of course. And of course, those in blackface that were allegedly uncomfortably laughing were like Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt, and of course, Shuck and Jive Ben Carson. Unbelievable. His shameless tactics underscore what really is a troubling trend of divisive rhetoric and opportunist exploitation. And there's no question about the ethical boundaries he crossed and will continue to. Will continue to. It's unreal. It's unreal. But this is it caused even Luther Campbell, 2 Live Crew down there in Florida with you, Bobby, to come out and say, "Hey, this is absolutely sickening. This is enough. If you black guys are supporting this, then step off." It's like this guy he is he once referred to himself as a stable genius. You remember that? There's nothing stable and nothing genius about him. He and Kanye deserve each other, don't they? The 2 guys who say they genius. Oh, no, let's correct that. Kanye is a superhero. You cannot approach a superhero like that, he said. So let's remember that. And speaking of being in blackface, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who we reported last week, got a sweetheart of an offer to quit his job. But, of course, has not responded to that great offer which expires within 30 days. Bobby Henry going in on Tim Scott. He said, "How about Tim Mushmouth Scott and his 'I love you, Trump'? There's a line drawn in the sand." Mushmouth. He's well, I don't even want to get into Tim Scott. He's a walking minstrel show that's been embarrassing himself constantly. But Justice Thomas, as affectionately known throughout the African American community as Uncle Thomas, has hired a law clerk accused of sending racist text messages. The Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University announced that graduate Crystal Clanton, a former Turning Point USA national field director, would work for Clarence Thomas during the 24-25 term. Clanton was accused in the 2017 New Yorker story of sending a text to fellow Turning Point members that read in capital letters, "I hate black people." Then later, when confronted, she says, "I don't remember the messages. I really can't tell you that I did or didn't." Her lack of recollection, I should say, didn't prevent further dust-ups because of the alleged text. A federal appeals court investigated an appellate judge for hiring her in 2022, but they said they couldn't substantiate claims of racism. Of course, Clarence Thomas vouched for her and claimed that bigotry is antithetical to her nature and character. Yeah, you can say, "I hate black folks." You can use the N word, and Clarence Thomas will say that doesn't mean you're racist. Uh, oh boy, first Bobby Henry. Now we have Miss Perry, Claudette Perry says, "Was Tim wearing the gold tennis shoe?" Oh my gosh, everybody's loaded for bear this morning. But I can totally understand. Totally understand such a, we as Black people, we talk about it, we take a lot on us, right? And when somebody in our community does something just so outrageous, we feel like, oh God, why you had to be Black? and a- and Tim Scott is one of those guys that makes us feel like that. Why does he have to be Black? Everything he says and does, you cringe and say, why does he have to be Black? Power 96 says not only was he wearing the gold shoes, but he was wearing the MAGA hat as well. Miss Perry says Fox News reported that the gold tennis shoes were made to attract, quote, the Blacks because Blacks love tennis shoes. Don't everybody like tennis shoes? That ignorant statement from Fox News, that guy, we talked about him last week as well, how ignorant, how awash in ignorance they all are. The sneaker industry is a $1 trillion industry almost, which means that not only are the Blacks buying sneakers, so are the whites and the Asians and the Jews and everyone else. Come on. It's like these people get over themselves. If I was anybody, if I was Jewish, or white or Asian or American Indian, I'd be offended because I know they buy sneakers too. Don't be giving the Blacks all the credit for the sneakers. It's just outrageous. Oh God, there it is. Tim Mushmouth. Uh, Austin is chiming in. I wonder if Austin is back from Dubai. He says Tim Scott is the happiest and most thankful coon ever. Y'all came loaded this morning. I need not say anything. Everybody's swinging from the what did they say? They coming from the top rope. And Bobby says, "Who is the more fool?" We got to get to Joy Reid, y'all. Who is the more fool, the fool or the one who follows the fool? That is a great question. That is a great question. It's unbelievable. We got to get to Joy Reid. Um, in Alabama, Randall Woodfin, the mayor of Birmingham, said on social media, he wrote on social media, that if state lawmakers pass a bill barring diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the state's public schools and universities, he would encourage parents of minority student athletes to select colleges and states where diversity and inclusion are prioritized. He was reacting to the state Senate's approval this week of a bill that would also bar public schools from affirming a divisive concept such as teaching that slavery and racism are aligned with the founding principles of the United States and that fault, blame, or bias should be assigned to members of a race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, or national origin on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, etc. It's just outrageous. I did a story for Black Press USA a couple of days ago, and my beautiful wife is bringing me my cappuccino. Um, but I did a story, and it's an amazing poll. If you're not hip to the Pew Research, they do phenomenal work. And the reason I like them as much as anybody else is that they're not small sample sizes. They tend to I mean, they get hundreds of thousands of people in their survey, so it's not small sample sizes. And so I enjoy um, the Pew Research. But I did a story based on findings on what folks want to be taught in school. And when the issue of how slavery affects us today came up, of course, we know that the majority of African Americans want that to be taught. The majority of teachers want that to be taught as well. And then, of course, they split it up into parties, Democrats, Republicans, of course. Those who identify as Democrats wanted to be taught more so than those who are Republicans. Um, Teachers are more apt to tell you that, listen, that is American history. And we know it's American history. You cannot have American history without Black history, and you can't really have global history You can't have global history without Black history. And of course, the slave trade, unfortunately, is a huge part of that history. And they want to hide from it. This is your doing, your ancestors doing it. Many of you, like a Donald Trump, want to continue that. They want to continue that. If not slavery itself, then they certainly want to take us back. You can argue with the wall on this, but they certainly want to take us back to at least Jim Crow, if not Reconstruction. So come on, let's be real about it. Power 96 says about time a Black mayor has spoken truth to power. Also, swag surfing doesn't count as DE&I. Tell that to Auburn and Alabama football fans. Yeah, well, they don't know what to do with themselves. Um, and Angela Connolly says, Black history, learn the lesson for free or get taught at a cost with capital letters. 100%, Angela. But, Alabama, in Alabama, colleges, 27% of Black folks are into college football in Alabama, play college football. And yes, Miss Berry said this is actually world history, 100%. So to have the mayor come out and say, listen, there's a lot of money involved in that, and it brings a lot of money to his city. But this is obviously a man who isn't into selling out. Go somewhere else, guys. He's telling folks to go somewhere. And, Alabama and Auburn have the most robust football programs in the nation, and he's telling them to go somewhere else if they pass this law. And that, folks, is leadership 101 right there. It's like, but you can, yeah, we making a lot of money. Yeah, it's keeping the lights on here and there, but uh, I'm not selling my soul for it. As Tim Scott and Clarence Thomas and Byron Donalds and Candace Owens, and we can go on, Killer Mike, Snoop Dogg, as they do. Ice Cube. Good for the mayor. Good for the mayor. It's good to see when somebody really stands up when money is on the line like that. It tells you who that person is. Tells a whole lot about that person anyway. Good for the mayor. And on a sad note, third-term Flint Councilman Eric Mays, an outspoken city leader during the Flint water crisis, who often clashed with fellow officials, died on Saturday. He was 65 years old. He was first elected in 2013 and was, quote, beloved for his bold and courageous service on behalf of Flint's First Ward, and his strong presence will be deeply missed. And that's what city officials posted on Facebook. The flag at Flint City Hall today is lowered to half staff in honor of him. Um, the community goes on to say the city hall officials go on to say this is a tremendous loss for our community and a shock to all friends and family. Flint Mayor Sheldon Neely said that as our communities grieve during this difficult time, on behalf of Councilman Mays' family, we ask that community members respect their privacy and allow them time and space to mourn. We continue to lift the family in prayer. We know in the past, Councilman Mays has verbally clashed with other members of the council. He's fighting for clean water. And the fact that he had to fight for that, the fact that anybody has to fight for something as basic as clean water is really telling. They even removed him in 2020 as vice president and finance committee chair after he accused the city council president of being rude and acting like, quote, Hitler before giving her the Nazi salute. This guy was not one to play with. He was removed from the meeting after that when the council stripped him of his roles. Back in 2016, Flint residents told the Detroit News that Mays was one of the first elected officials to raise questions about the quality of water in Flint. He was the one sounding the alarm before it really became alarming. And we know what happened in Flint. Wow. So, really, on behalf of the Black Press, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we certainly send our condolences to uh, Councilman Eric Mays. And a quick note before we get to Joyanne Reed, on a NNPA, more personal note, we certainly send out the best of wishes and thoughts to Janice Ware and James Washington of the Atlanta Voice. Just get well soon, James. Get well, get well. We certainly want to keep you around for forever, really, if we could. But get well. Joyanne Reid, the host of MSNBC's The Readout and the New York Times best-selling author of The Man Who Sold America, traces the extraordinary lives and legacy of civil rights icons Medgar and Merle Evers, situating Medgar Evers' assassination as a catalyzing moment in American history. Joyanne Reid is the host of The Readout, which airs weeknights from 7 to 8 on MSNBC. She previously hosted the weekend program AM Joy and a daily news show, The Reid Report. We welcome to Let It Be Known, Joyanne Reid. Thanks for joining the Black Press's Let It Be Known.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So, Joy, the story behind the story of your new book, Medgar and Merle Evers, and the love story that awakened America, explores the lives of civil rights icons Medgar and Merle Evers. What inspired you to delve into their story, and what unique perspective did you hope to bring to their narrative?
Well, what inspired me to do this piece was Merle Evers Williams herself. Just meeting her in person for the first time in 2018 and hearing her talk about her late husband of, it had been almost 6 decades, but she still spoke about him with this incredible and deep love. That story that she told me just stayed with me. And, I said to her at the time I met her, I said, Miss Merle, this is something you should write about. And she said, I've written about it. I've written 2 books. And she did write 2 very brilliant books, including For Us the Living, her first memoir that she wrote only a few years after he died. But, I just felt like there was still more to say. And, I wanted to do a civil rights book, but I didn't want to just do a civil rights book. I felt like the story and the story of the two of them, not just him, was worth telling.
Yeah, and of course the timing, Black History Month, the release anyway, Black History Month, and with all that's going on, and Joy, you're one of the foremost, if not the foremost, commentator on what's really going on in this country. Um, the timing for you could it have been more perfect?
It was perfect timing. It just worked out because it took a little longer to do the book. It's interesting because I wound up just getting more and more interviews. They just kept coming through. And interestingly enough, the Black Eagle, Joe Madison, I wound up getting a very late interview with him that I said, oh, I got to add this story because I learned that he was the one who inspired Merle Evers Williams to actually run for board chair of the NAACP. So I said, oh, I got to get that story. And so and of course he has recently passed and is an icon in his own right. And so the additional interviews, just more kept coming in, kind of delayed it because originally we were going to try to release the book last September, but with all the additional research, we wound up pushing it, and we were blessed that it pushed it to February, which of course is Black History Month, and it's also my mother's birth month. So it all kind of worked out divinely.
Well, and obviously too the unfortunate passing of the Black Eagle, Joe Madison. So that, I guess in that sense too, the timing uh, perhaps couldn't be better as well. You also mentioned, or situate, I should say, Medgar Evers' assassination as a catalyzing moment in American history. How did you approach the process of highlighting this pivotal event and its broader impact on the civil rights movement?
Yeah, I think what I learned in doing the research for the book is just how central Medgar Evers was to the whole story, to all the stories that we know more about, to the Civil Rights Act of 64, which originally, of course, was the Civil Rights Act of 1963, which Merle Evers held in her hands after her husband was assassinated, handed to her by President Kennedy himself as she and her children stood in the Oval Office greeted by him after her husband's assassination, to the March on Washington, which was partly inspired by the assassination of Medgar Evers and the urgency to have that bill passed. The fact that he was going to testify in front of the House Judiciary Committee for that bill. The fact that Dr. King spoke about him and Emmett Till in Detroit when he gave his first original version of the I Have a Dream speech and name checked Emmett Till and Medgar Evers in that speech as part of his dream, and then later had to remove that reference for the more famous version of the speech on August 28, 1963, to kind of soften it a bit. The fact that Kennedy was assassinated himself in December, in part, I think a lot of people in the family believe as part of the rage on the far right to his finally coming through and trying to push through a civil rights bill, and just all that happened with the four little girls assassinated by the same clan that killed Medgar Evers. You could just go on and on, from the Emmett Till case Medgar Evers investigated all the way to the assassination of Kennedy. He figures in all of these stories.
Yeah, I really enjoy how you have done this too, because I mentioned a couple of times already this love story, right? Because behind all of these civil rights icons, it's always this strong Black woman who plays more of a role than many of us even understand. You explore the love story between Medgar and Merle. What aspects of their relationship, Joy, did you find most inspiring or moving, and how did their personal connection contribute to their resilience in the face of so much adversity?
Yeah, I mean, they were a real couple, real relationship with real issues and real arguments and, real doubts that Merle Evers Williams had at the time about her husband's civil rights work, which is totally natural and normal. They were in dangerous, deadly Mississippi, and she had deep doubts, and she was very honest about those. But I think what really happened was that this was a marriage of the minds. They were an intellectual romance before they were a physical romance, which I loved about that relationship, and the fact that they challenged each other. They forced each other to be better. Their marriage went through a lot of crises as a result of Medgar's civil rights work, but they stuck through it because in the end, Merle Evers, she admired her husband. She admired his manliness, his determination, his love, his people. And when she challenged him, saying, "Do you love this movement more or me?" He said, "I'm doing this because I love you and our children, and I want to make this state and this country better for all of you."
Yeah, interesting. Do you, Joy, and again, I know we said at the top how you are always at the forefront of so much. Your commentary is just always seems to be spot on. But do you see today a Medgar and Merle today somewhere in this fight that we still have?
You know what? It's so interesting that you say that because as I was finishing up the book, I was getting to know the Justins and Gloria, the Tennessee Three: Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson. And to me, that is the kind of bravery, especially among these two young Black men and this older white lady who is their ally. That is, what this book is about. It's about the strong young Black folks. Who fight for our freedom, but also the liberation and freedom of everyone. The Justins are fighting for everyone's liberation. And Gloria Johnson is a true white ally. Like that is how you get change and how you make change. I think about the members of the squad. I think about Ayanna Pressley, who right now is putting a bill on the floor for universal basic income, fighting for her people. You know, I think of all of these members. I think of Cori Bush, who came out of Ferguson, Missouri, and is fighting for Ferguson amid every kind of rage about her relationship. How dare she fall in love? If she was white, you'd say that her relationship with her bodyguard is the bodyguard that Whitney Houston starred in. But as a Black woman, she faces everything from death threats to rape threats to threats to her job, threats to throw her in prison. There are a lot of people who are strong and are fighting. There are just so many of these young members of Congress Matthew Frost out of Florida, the great and terrifying state of Florida, who's fighting for right. There are so many people that you could name, whether they're in politics or out of politics, who are fighting the good fight and standing up at a time when you see a lot of cowardice. You see a lot of very senior and very wealthy Republican politicians who are afraid to stand up to Donald Trump because he will post about them on Truth Social, not even Twitter anymore. That they're so scared they refuse to stand up to this man and are willing to take a knee and give away our democracy. And so, in the face of a lot of cowardice, you do have a lot of really strong, really powerful voices of courage. And so, I hope this book will inspire more people to be courageous, because Medgar and Merle had nothing. They had no money, they had no power. What they had was conviction and love for each other, love for their people, love for their family, and even love for their state and this country. And that's all the armor that they needed.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because and I hear you and I feel it too. But I can't resist the temptation of asking you, when you're talking about someone like you said, a strong black man like that, and then you see a Tim Scott, and you see him kowtow to Donald Trump. Um, it really has to do something to someone you've researched, and I know you've researched more than just Medgar and Merle, so many others. You're so well versed in all of this, but when you see a Tim Scott, it must does something different for you. I'm sure. I mean, I'd like for you to just give us a minute of that.
It does. I mean, this man had the nerve to quote Fannie Lou Hamer, who I also researched for this book. Fannie Lou Hamer, who quoted first class citizenship, which was Medgar's line when she went to the 1964 Democratic Convention in Atlantic City and tore it up so much that Lyndon Johnson said, "Get this woman off TV," because her voice was so powerful as she demanded what Medgar Evers wanted. She was prison she was in jail, I should say, when he died, and she lamented that, and she carried forth this anger for this anger of black folks, this demand, this righteous demand for the right to vote and the right to live dignified lives. For him to quote that woman, that great black woman, that icon, and to do that in favor of Donald Trump, someone who wants to tear down democracy, who says he would unleash police on black people and take away any limitations to the violence they could impart upon our bodies, for him to use that, it's just it's madness to me. I see, very wealthy hip hop artists, after Donald Trump is found liable for sexual assault and fined $83 million for defamation, then they decide, now it's time to marry my brand to Donald Trump. I don't understand that. I don't understand anybody black who, knowing all we now know, those of us who lived in New York knew who Donald Trump was. We knew what he was in 2016. We knew the Central Park Five, that's the exonerated five. So we knew that story. I was a teenager when that happened. So I never saw Donald Trump as anything other than a bigot and a madman.
Yeah, that's
But
why.
now everybody knows.
Yeah,
It's not a secret that only New Yorkers know. Now everybody knows. For anyone to now, particularly somebody like Tim Scott, who's a United States senator, to shear himself of his dignity in favor of Donald Trump because he wants to replace hang Mike Pence. If you say hang the vice president and his name is Tim Scott, that's gonna hit a lot different, black man. And I don't think you understand what you're asking to do, the job you're asking for. That's the job. He tried to hang the last guy that had that job. So all I can say is bless his heart. He's from the South, so he will understand what that
well,
means.
see, this is why we love Joy. Joy, I know we only have a couple of minutes left. So underscore for us, if you will. The book is Medgar and Merle. It's already a bestseller, and we're gonna make sure it continues to be a bestseller. She doesn't need us to do that, but we're gonna do our part anyway. But can you elaborate
Thank
and underscore a little bit on how the efforts of Medgar and Merle, how it left a lasting impact on the ongoing struggle for civil rights in America? Just underscore that for us.
Absolutely. Medgar Evers fought for the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which we're going to celebrate the Jubilee year of this July. Medgar Evers allowed Mississippians to defy the 1890 draconian constitution and gain the right to vote. Mississippi had the most successful Reconstruction of all because of the Black majority that came in after the Civil War, and they had the most destructive, revocation of those rights. But now there is a right to vote if people would only use it. And by the way, in the last statewide election, Democrats, Elvis Presley's kin, got 48% of the vote. These states are winnable, and it only takes people to regain and to take ownership of the glorious past of people like Medgar Evers, who fought for the basic rights of citizens in that state and reclaim that history, reclaim that dignity and that pride, And change can be made. Mississippi is the state where we lost our abortion rights in this country, but that can be reversed. It just takes people to reclaim the honor that Medgar Evers bestowed upon Mississippi with his presence. The airport, when you land in Jackson, is called Medgar Evers International Airport. Mississippians need to, I believe, seize back that glory because they have the numbers and the ability to change it if people can just be re inspired. A lot of people are just exhausted by politics and they don't think that it can work anymore. But what you'll find out is that if you don't pay attention to politics, that doesn't mean politics won't pay attention to you. And most of the time, when it pays attention to you, it does so in the worst way. So I think another outcome I really hope comes from this book and all the books that are out now that are about these civil rights figures and about them being ordinary people, because that was kind of what I was trying to say. These are regular folks, is that regular folks can change the world. We just have to organize and reclaim our dignity.
Yeah, and before we let you go, Joy, you could see a movie 100 times, and each time you see it, you always find something new. You could read a book 100 times. You did this research. What, if anything, surprised you or stood out the most about this wonderful couple?
Well, it's interesting. The thing that stood out to me the most was not even something necessarily about them, because because I had spoken with Miss Murley, I knew how much she was in love with this man. So I knew the romance was going to be intense. I knew it was fraught. I knew it was fraught. I knew these stories because I interviewed her half a dozen times for the book. So that I knew. What I didn't know and was pleasantly surprised about, and it's interesting because the first person who tipped me off to it was actually Dr. King's daughter, Bernice King. And then in looking to her mom's biography and to a great biography of Dr. Betty Shabazz, the thing that I enjoyed learning that I didn't know was the close relationship and sisterhood bond of Dr. Betty Shabazz, Coretta Scott King, and Merle Evers Williams, later Merle Evers Williams. Their bond, they were like the group chat before we had group chats. And their sisterhood and their intense bond and friendship was one of the pleasant surprises of the book. All three, I got the story from all three of their angles and in person from Miss Murley. And she was so joyful in telling the story of her friends. And I think that's one of the things that was surprising and really fun to write about in the book was that sisterhood. In addition, obviously, to the great romance, one of the great romances of all time between Medgar Evers and Merle. Hail up, big up, and large up, Black press of America. You know we need the Black press. The Black press is who illuminated our stories and has done for a century. And so we want to keep the Black press in our minds, hearts, spirits, and in our eyeballs. We need to be watching, reading, and listening to the Black press because without it, we wouldn't have our full freedom.
Joy and Reid, MSNBC host, author, and just an outspoken uh, individual who you talk about speaking truth to power. Always does, always has, and really cool of her to want to salute the Black press. 197 years the Black press has been around. Without the Black press, there is no uh, anyone else. You name them. There is no one else. It started next month. Actually, is Black Press Week. It's the 197th anniversary. March 16th, 1827 is when Freedom's Journal opened in New York. Of course, with Samuel Cornish, right? And John Rushorn, um, who started the Black Press with Freedom's Journal in New York. Of course, we said it a million times, but it's worth repeating how they boldly proclaim, we wish to plead our own cause. For too long, others have spoken for us. And here we are, 197 years afterwards. And we still need to plead our own cause, as evident by what we saw in South Carolina over the weekend at that Trump rally. It's evident by the fact that we continue to see the uninformed, the misinformed, the misinformation, the disinformation. Um, when you look at newspapers, Black owned newspapers, they continue to lead the charge. Yes, they have their website. We say newspapers. We'll never in our minds get away from newspapers. Physically, we have, but there are still some viable papers being printed as well as online. And look, we last week, Vice President Kamala Harris went and visited with one of our oldest, the New Pittsburgh Courier. Sat down with the publisher there, Rod Doss. You can read about it online. Um, at the New Pittsburgh Courier's website, and also at blackpressusa.com. That story is there as well. Look, Los Angeles Sentinel, Chicago Defender, which the president himself continues to tout when he talks about the black press. We have a meeting here with the president in Wilmington, his team, anyway, in Wilmington at his headquarters this week. They continue to understand the value of the black press 197 years later. Um, of course, in DC, there, we know so many really concentrate on the nation's capital, especially during an election year. You got of course, the Afro, and of course, the great Washington Informer. Denise Rolock Barnes did a amazing job leading Asala's Black History Luncheon over the weekend as well, with Congressman, the House Minority Leader, I should say, Hakeem Jeffries, and his brother, Dr. Jeffries. Tiffany Cross was there as well to help moderate a great conversation. If you missed it, you can. I believe that Asala still has it on their website. An amazing afternoon there at the Westin Hotel. It was really a fabulous event with the leader who was very outspoken too. The one thing about Hakeem Jeffries I liked is that he wasn't holding back, and neither was his brother. His brother was absolutely phenomenal. Denise we were texting yesterday. She told me that he hung around a long time, Dr. Jeffries, that is, afterwards. So obviously he had a lot of fun doing that. But then you have so many. Bobby Henry, we talked about earlier. You got the West Side Gazette down there, but our newspapers are everywhere, even in Omaha. Our buddy Terry out there in Omaha, Nebraska, the home of Malcolm X. Beautiful paper there, the Omaha Star. We are nationwide. St. Louis American. I always think about them because there's such a good paper there too. Everywhere you go, down in Charlotte, you have a paper there. You have papers in Atlanta, of course, the Voice and others. And so keep up with the black press, folks, is what we're saying. 197 years old. Who would ever have thought, right? 197 years old. And hopefully you guys will stick around for the 200th anniversary that's coming up. And black people know how to party. And so 200 years is worth partying. 200 years. So we're looking forward to that as well, and looking forward to doing some special things leading up to the 200th anniversary of the Black Press of America. This is where it's at. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Stick by it. I call you a handkerchief head Negro. I call him a handkerchief head Negro. And I'm sticking with it. Google it. You got words like gaslighting, handkerchief head Negro. All that's in the dictionary now. You just outdated.
Point of information through you to the speaker. Do you know my name is Quincy Murphy or Councilman Murphy or Third Ward or Mr. Murphy? Not handkerchief Negro or none of those words.
I view you as a handkerchief head Negro. I don't know how you view
point
yourself.
Of information through you to the speaker. My name is Councilman Murphy, Mr. Murphy, or Third Ward Councilman. Give me three. No, we ain't using adjectives or we ain't using those other words. And all due respect to you, I'm asking you.